Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to my channel, and something a bit different today, different camera angles, different content, although it will be related to things I've done before. So if you have been following my channel, you know that I've been doing a lot of electronic, improvisational, experimental music videos on my channel. That's been my main music output over the last few years. After I started using my phenol synthesizer, and the one you can see just in shot there. And you will also have noticed that the background for those videos, the desk, has changed over time, and also you will notice the setup is different from time to time because I have to rig it up and tear it down every single time because I haven't had a dedicated space for my studio setup, as it were, if I can call it that, my music setup, with everything plugged in and ready to play. I haven't had the space for that because my room, the one I'm in, it might not be easy to see in any of the shots now, but it is a really tiny room. The smallest bedroom in the house is my office, and I have to share that space with several activities and hobbies and work as well. So therefore I haven't been able to dedicate the space to have my music equipment set up. And this is especially true, of course, after I got into hardware synthesizers, which of course do take up a little bit of space, as you may know. And then, of course, I've gone through a few different desks as well. First, I had just a normal standard 60 by 120, I think it is, Ikea desk. And then I decided that was too small, so I had to expand it. And I put on a piece of plywood and made it about twice as big. And then earlier last year, I think, or late last year, I can't remember the exact timings now, I redid an old dining table to turn into my new desk, and that's the one you've been seeing lately, which is the one with a nice distressed wooden surface with the varnish sort of peeled off and sanded off, which I really like and which is great for so many things. And while I think that's a beautiful background to use for my music videos, and also it's nice to have just a minimal setup in the shot, there are many advantages to that because you can focus entirely on the instrument being used. I've always really wanted to have a setup where I could have everything rigged up and ready to go, with all the different possibilities that gives me, and I don't have to spend so much time just rigging things up, tearing things down, and setting things up for a video as well. But I thought I didn't have the space. But earlier this year, I decided to move our electronic piano. We have a nice Yamaha electronic piano, and I decided to move that up into my room because I wanted to play more. I wanted to learn to play my own compositions on it because I have made some piano compositions that I really like playing and that I really enjoy playing, but I still have to learn them properly, and it is a little bit more of an effort if I have to go from my room down to the dining room, move the dining table out of the way, because that's also quite a small room. It's actually directly underneath this one and about the same size. Um, and so I thought, if I have it in my room, I can practice more often because it's right there, and I can use it as a MIDI controller as well and play, not just using the Yamaha's internal sound, but use it for other virtual instruments, and especially piano tech, which is my go-to piano sound of choice on my computer. And so I did. I moved it up the stairs, which it's ridiculously heavy, those electronic pianos, and of course it's not easy to move in a cramped space, but I managed to get it upstairs into my room and into the corner here, of next to the window. And I did use it quite a bit, but it was a little bit cramped. I mean, there was room for it, but my desk actually gets in the way of my left elbow when I'm playing, so I couldn't get a properly comfortable playing position either next to it because of my desk being in the way. And then I realized that I measured it, and I sort of realized that if I just had 2 more inches, 5 more centimeters, I could fit in the desk that I used to have, the small Ikea desk that I had before, where I had the piano. And because it's a desk, there's room for more things underneath it, so that's a good storage space for things. And if I could fit in that desk, I could fit in my studio equipment. So I'm going to change. I've changed the shot now. So this is. So here's my Ikea desk. This is the 60 by 120 Ikea desk. That's this really sort of plain, cheap one. But also another nice thing about it, and I didn't think about this at the time, but of course when we bought it, my idea was that it would be nice to have one with adjustable height. So I bought the legs with adjustable height, which means that now I can put them to about the maximum height, which means they line up just below the windowsill, which is behind it. There's a window behind here. And I can make it a standing desk, which is even better than if it's a sitting desk, because it's easier to reach the entire desk surface and everything on it. And this is where I now set up my audio equipment. This is basically all I've got at the moment. And my main sound sources, of course, the Phenol synths, 3 of them, and my Breadbox Dysphonia, which has sort of become my favorite main synth voice when I'm playing. Also, I've got my Epm6 Mixer, which I've done a few videos on. I've got the Dreadbox Erebus, which I'm not sure yet if I'm going to sell this or keep this. I'll get back to that. I've got the Zoya, which of course is one of my main pieces of equipment as well. I use it both for sequencing, other control, and also as an effects processor. Very nice reverbs and delays on the Zoya. I've got the Korg Chaosillator KO1 original that I bought 15 years ago now. Is it 15 years? I think it's 15 years now. And I got my MIDI Fighter Twister, the main job of which is to be a tactile knob controller for the Zoya to control whatever I'm doing with the Zoya at the time, whether it's running a sequencer or adjusting effects, etc., etc. I also have recently acquired the Electro Harmonix V256 vocoder here, which I'll put a link to some videos there, because I have made a few videos where I use that, not as the usual robot voice vocoding, but as a sort of filtering for the sound to create quite ominous and scary effects, I would say. And I'm sort of channeling my inner Cthulhu character, I guess, when I'm doing that, and I'm thinking a whisperer in the darkness. Now, also back here, there is a reel-to-reel recorder, which I have been using for different things. I have been recording on it sometimes, but my main thing I've used it for in my music setup has been as a delay, because it's 3-head, which means you can get the sound into it, and then you can take it out again, and of course with a delay because of the distance between the heads in the thing, and of course you can feed it back into itself to create a delay. I've also got a 3-band radio, currently without the aerial, or the main FM aerial is not attached at the moment, and the reason is I use this mainly as a noise source, not for listening to radio. So I can use this instead of the usual white noise in my synthesizer setup. And also I really love this knob. And then I've got a regular tape recorder here as well, which is something I haven't really used it much in my music setup, but of course there's one of the ideas I have is I like tape noise. I've sometimes added it to some of my music projects, not lately, but when I'm doing musique concrète, I usually add some kind of tape noise to the composition because I like the texture of it, and I'm using real tape noise, of course, recorded from actual tape. Yeah, and of course here's the microphone that is now connected to the vocoder. I've got this here ready to use if I need to. And headphones currently connected to the cassette recorder. I'm not sure exactly where that will be in my setup when everything is rigged up. Now, one thing about this is that there's two things really that I've done here that is important to me, and one of them is I want to be able to record the sound both unprocessed and processed. So, and of course the processing, the effects are from the Zoya, which means that the input to the Zoya comes from one of the main outputs on the mixer, and the output of the Zoya goes to a second recorder. And a secondary, there are two outputs that I use now on the mixer for recording. So one of them goes to my main recorder for line level signals, which is the Zoom H4n here. Let's see, there we are. And then the output from the Zoya goes into my Sony PCM D100 recorder, which is technically a better recorder than this one, but this is the one I'm used to using. I know exactly how it behaves. And at the moment, by the way, I'm using the Sony PCM D100 is what I'm recording the sound on for this this video. So that's my voice recording going through the PCM D100. That's the main purpose I have of that recorder. Also, I use it for some field recording, and of course when I'm not recording my own voice, I'm using it as a secondary recorder for my music setup. And at the moment pretty much everything is wired up the way I need to. And now you may notice, if you haven't noticed already, how many sound sources do we have here? So we have 2 channels from each phenol, so that's 6. Mono output from the Erebus, that's 7. Radio, it's only stereo if you have a good FM signal, so I'm considering that a mono now. So that is 8. Key oscillator, 10. Vocoder, 11. And then we have the dysphonia, which can be 2 or 3 channels if you like. So 12, 13, 14, that sort of thing. And I've got the Epm6, which is a 10-channel mixer, technically. It's called Epm6, which is quite a generous way to name it, because lots of mixers, the number in the name indicates the total number of channels, whereas on the Soundcraft ones, the number indicates the number of preamps. So it's got 6 preamps, but it has 2 additional stereo channels, so that's 10 channels in. And one could argue that you could also use the 2-track input as well, but of course you can't adjust it in any way apart from select whether you're listening to it or not. That's it. So though that has to be mixed somewhere else and just be ready to go into the mix, but it's still useful. So technically you could say it's a 10-channel mixer, and that's still not enough for all my sound sources. But a great thing about the phenol synthesizers is that they are stereo input as well as output, which means you can take I'll actually show a point on this one down here. So I can actually take these external input sockets and plug those into the mixer over here, and I can let that go via processing on the filters and the VCAs, etc. if I want to, and then I can use the phenol as a kind of sub-mixer. So each phenol has 2 inputs that I can add additional sound sources without letting them go through a mixer, which is great because that means I don't need to get a bigger mixer just yet. While it would have been nice to let all the sound sources now go via the mixer, that's the way I'm doing it, because it works rather well. You can actually daisy chain these phenols and not use a mixer if you don't want to. So at the moment I have the radio connected to this one. I only need one of these plugs really. And the phenol in middle here is connected to, what am I connected to at the moment? Yeah, so this phenol here is actually connected via this phenol here. So this one goes in here, and then I will send the audio onwards from there. And then the last one is connected to the mixer, the stereo, the EPM, the Soundcraft mixer. What other things are there? Yeah, and the second, yeah, so, and one of these phenols, this phenol here, is connected to the mixer as well in one of the stereo inputs, because when I'm using these phenols here together, usually I don't need to adjust the panning because I can do that on the phenols themselves. So I can use just the stereo bus on the Epm6, and the last stereo bus here on the Epm6 I'm using for the K oscillator, which also has its own stereo effects, so you don't need to add anything to it. Right, so what else is there to say about this setup? Well, you may notice if you haven't seen my videos, but you know about the Dreadbox Erebus, no, sorry, the Dreadbox Dysphonia, you may notice this looks a bit strange. So this is the Dysphonia here, this Eurorack sized thing here, and the rest around it is my own DIY solution for, first of all, well, I have to make a case for it, and secondly, I wanted to double all the connection points in banana jack so I can connect them with my phenol synths. And thirdly, of course, and this is what I really like about it, is that the connection points are then out of the way of the controls, because if you use these connection points on the panel, it gets really, really cramped. So it's not, because especially this one, I like playing these sliders down here particularly. I need access to them to play them, because that's where a lot of the expression and creation of sound on the Dysphonia comes from, is controlling the mod, LFO, envelope, not so much the envelope actually. I use the mod, the low pass filter and the 12 dB filter. Those three are the ones I use all the time to control the sound, a little bit to a lesser extent the LFO and the envelope. So by removing all these cables that would have been here, I'm actually freeing up this space to play the controls, and that makes such a big difference. Now, one of the reasons I'm a bit in two minds about Erebus, it sounds absolutely amazing, of course, and so does the Dysphonia, because, as you know, Dreadbox, they make absolutely lush, rich, really sort of solid sounding oscillators, and they have very characterful filters. And there's a little bit sort of a break-off point just as it goes into self-oscillation that is very interesting to play around with, that sort of transition, which is very short. But the Dysphonia and the phenols, they are all open architecture. That means they don't have any normal connections. There is nothing that is pre-patched inside these four synthesizers. So every connection that you want to make between the different parts of the synth have to be made with cables. And that means also that you don't have to distinguish between audio signals and control signals, which is great. And also it means you don't have to override connections that are already there with switchable sockets. And this also made it easy for me to make the extension here with the doubling up of the sockets. It would be harder to do on the Erebus, because this is a semi-modular, and that's my only semi-modular, which means that without anything plugged in, it's already got a normal signal flow. And to me, that actually, it feels like it gets in the way of my creativity. It's a bit strange to say it, but once you get used to open architecture synthesizers where everything has to be plugged in, it's easier to visualize exactly what's happening in the patch. You can see the signal flow because you have the cables. And oh, by the way, that's another thing. So I've got my cables on the end of my desk here. I've put up some hooks. It's a kind of a sort of over door set of hooks that you use for hanging your towels on the door in the bathroom, that sort of thing. And there I've got all my patch cables. So the thing is that even such a basic thing as just taking the oscillator into the output is visualized on the phenol. You already have a patch cable there. So you need to use a cable, but it's so easy to see what the patch is doing at any point of time. It's easy to therefore to remember, and because you've actually done it physically with the cable as well. And when you're just going with the flow and trying to feel your way around and sort of see what's happening, that feels easier when everything becomes tactile, not just the controls, which of course is one of the big reasons people want to use hardware synth, is the tactile controls. You've got the knobs and the sliders. You feel it with your fingers when you're making something, not just using the mouse on the screen, but also the physicality of the patch cables does make a difference, I think, to me. And the phenols, because of the size, it's like 5U, I suppose, height-wise. So you've got very nice spaced out patch panel, and it's very easy to use compared to a cramped Eurorack space. So I have considered a few times to replace my phenols with Eurorack, and also I was thinking about selling my Dysphonia just to also to go Eurorack. But first of all, it's very poor value for money to go to Eurorack compared to what you get for the phenols, because the phenol is, if you were to get these modules in Eurorack, the equivalent of these modules, it would cost twice as much. So, and it has a lot of character. It looks, I like the look of it. I know some people say, oh, it's a bit as if Fisher-Price made a synth, but yeah. So every time I think about selling my phenol, I end up buying another one, because the best thing to improve your and augment your possibilities with a phenol synthesizer is to add another phenol. So now I have 3. The last one was, I didn't really need the last one. But the thing is, they have been discontinued, and there was only one available in the shop in the UK, and they hardly ever come up second hand around here, which is like once or twice a year, if that. And so I thought I had a chance to buy one now. I may as well get one more. So that's my sort of backup phenol if one of them breaks. And it is nice to have 3 because they make a wicked drone, actually. So you can make some amazing drone sounds with the phenols. Now, one thing about the phenols that actually I'll talk a little bit about that. So yeah, this is my iPad. Actually, my iPad is here now, and as you can see, this is, you may be able to see this. This is just a picture from my, this is a camera remote control now for my for this camera over here. But this is where I would normally have my oscilloscope view, of course, when I'm playing. But the purpose of, now this rack here for the phenols, just to say a few words about that, it's meant as a prototype, and the space in the middle here is actually exactly the right size for a Eurorack rail. So I can add Eurorack right in the middle here, or other things that are Eurorack compatible. Now, what I have decided to do though, and I have done prototyping for this before as well, is to add attenuators first of all. You need a lot of attenuators in when you're using modular synths. The Dysphonia is very good in that it's attenuation on the outputs of the mod, the envelope, and the LFO. That's very important. On the phenol, on the other hand, there is no output trimmer on the envelopes or the LFO, which is its main drawback, actually, I would say, one of its main drawbacks. And of course, you only have 3 attenuators that are free on the phenol. So you have the VCA1, VCA2, and the adder, which is an attenuverter and amplifier. It can amplify up to 200%, plus 100% if you like. And it gives out a negative and a positive signal. But that means you need extra attenuation, and ideally you would have on the LFO and the envelopes, you want to send those via an attenuator before you send them into anything else. So one needs at least 3 attenuators for each of these phenols, and that's an absolute minimum, I think. and I want to make some DIY ones, which is one of the easiest thing to make in DIY, by the way, if you want to do synthesizer DIY, because it's basically just a potentiometer and a ground connection and a few sockets. That's it. So additionally, I also want to add some optional slew limiters as well, because there is no slew limiting on the phenols. And a slew limiter also something that is incredibly easy to make in a DIY, because you need a resistor and you need a capacitor, and that's it. And if you want to make it variable, you add a potentiometer as well. So, or you can make it switchable by adding different value capacitors and a multi position switch. So that's possible as well. So I'm thinking about those two options. I have to do some breadboarding and see which one I go for. So that space here is then meant to be for that when that is done. So, and I made this rack when I only had 2 phenols, and I thought that was going to be it. And then of course I added the third one. So if I remove the Erebus now, I'll probably move the Dysphonia up here and this phenol down here as well, which might look better. But yeah, it looks a bit messy, but everything is patched together in a way that I want it. And I still haven't tested if it works properly, but I'm quite sure it does, because I know where everything is patched. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about today, really, just to show you my new setup. If you have any questions, by the way, please let me know in the comments, and I'll answer them as well as I can. And oh yeah, there's one more thing, by the way, one more thing.
One more thing.
That I forgot to mention in this setup, and that is behind here. You can't really see it so well. In the windowsill, I have the Mio XM MIDI router. So that allows me to send different MIDI signals to different locations in my setup as well. Right, and I still haven't set up the configuration for that. So that means I can send a different MIDI signal to each phenol, to the Erebus, to the Dysphonia, to the Zoya, and from the Zoya, of course, and then route them to wherever they need to be. And the reason that the router is very important in that setup is that the phenol synthesizers, you can't just use MIDI throughs and MIDI outs to repeat signals, because they are fixed to a single MIDI channel. So they all receive MIDI on channel 1. And they receive the same CCs, so it's pitch, gate, CC1, and that's it, isn't it? Pitch, CC1, gate and clock. Yeah, so gate and clock, and all on channel 1. Which means if I want to send different MIDI to the 3 different phenols, I have to translate 3 different channels from the Zoya. I would, in most cases, and I would have to sort of send, say, channel 5, 6, and 7 from the Zoya, and then the MIDI router, the Mio XM from iConnectivity, will translate that into MIDI channel 1 on one output, MIDI channel 1 on the second output, and MIDI channel 1 on the third output, so that those 3 are separate and sent to each phenol. I also made a video about that if you're curious about how that works. So that's one of the reasons, or the main reason, I would say, why I got the Mio XM MIDI router, because if I didn't have, I would have been fine without it if it weren't for that, really, because some other stuff has MIDI outs and it can MIDI throughs. So that, yeah. Anyway, I think that's what I wanted to show you today. So I hope you found that interesting, and I'm really looking forward to showing you what I can do with this setup sound-wise. So I'm going to experiment a little bit more, because I still haven't really played it after I set things up. I was spending a lot of yesterday just making sure all the cables were in the right place. And I think everything looks fine, so I just have to get used to using it, and also planning to do some labeling as well. While I'm getting used to it, I need labels. So on the phenol inputs, I would label what goes in, when something is coming from the outside that needs to be mixed through the phenol. And on the mixer itself, I would also put labels to show which channel is what, so I don't have to think about it when I'm playing. And of course, as I get used to it, it'll be second nature and I don't have to think about it. But nice, neat labels. Probably a good idea anyway, and I may keep them even when I remember everything, because it's just nice to make sure you don't control the wrong thing, especially on the mixer. So yeah. So I'm quite looking forward to using these things together and seeing how that works. So I'm hoping you're looking forward to it too. And well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. And goodbye for now.